Good afternoon. We're going to jump right back into our next session. I'd like to hand it over to Mark Darrell. Mark is Senior Vice President, General Counsel, and Chief Compliance Officer at Spire, one of our conference sponsors, and he's also a member of the university's Board of Trustees. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you, Vincent. Good afternoon, everyone. It's really great to join you this afternoon and to be on campus here at Webster University. At Spire, we are delighted to continue our partnership with Webster in supporting this very important conference. And I've been here a number of times, and I really enjoy coming and always learn something new. Our next session is Gender Equality in the African Diaspora, presented by Dr. Muthoni Musangali, an associate professor in the Department of Professional Counseling here at Webster. Dr. Musangali's research pursuits include the development of culturally responsive approaches to counseling minority clients, advancement of counseling in sub-Saharan Africa, globalization of counseling, and cultural considerations for conducting international research. While progress has been made toward the goal of gender equality on the African continent, there remains a great deal yet to be done. The problem of gender inequality in Kenya are mirrored in the African diaspora, with women bearing the majority of household responsibilities, while also contributing to the economy of their homes. This presentation will take a look into the lives of African women living in the United States, and will examine the challenges of gender inequality with a particular focus on Kenyan women living in St. Louis. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Musangali.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for that wonderful introduction. Can you all hear me? Okay, perfect. So I was following some of the conversations this morning and really appreciated the call to engagement. One of the things that I heard that I took away from the last presentation was the idea of not just talking about diversity and inclusion, but really also about how are we transformed? How can we be transformed ourselves, right? Not making a space for others, but also really to be transformed ourselves. So my conversation, the focus of my presentation this afternoon is gender equality or inequity, equality or lack thereof, among the African women in the diaspora. I need to work the clicker, so wish me luck so I can advance the clicker. Okay, so just to give a little bit of context for this conversation, the United Nations in I believe it was 2015, that the United Nations established the Sustainability Development Goals. There's 17 of this. And the overall objective of this is to achieve a better and more sustainable future for all. Keywords: for all. A better and more sustainable future for all. And these goals, the 17 goals, seek to address a myriad of issues that we face on a global level, ranging from peace and justice, climate change and global warming, poverty, and the thing that I'm going to focus on for this presentation, which is United Nations Development Goal number 5, and that is the one that focuses on gender equality. These are my children. I thought, how can you talk about African women and not have these lovely African girls right here? It was about 10 years ago. They're much older now. So the United Nations Sustainability Development Goal number 5. The way that this goal is stated is that it's a goal to achieve gender equality and empowerment of all girls and women. And I forgot to say that the goals, the idea with the UN goals, again, is that we're working towards attaining all of these 17 goals and surpassing that by the year 2030. So under this umbrella of goal number 5 is to end all forms of discrimination against all women and girls everywhere. This has been the focus of a lot of the work that our Chancellor, Dr. Strobel, has been championing over the last 2 years on the Red Card campaign, which we will have an opportunity to talk about, and I think you all have one on your tables as well. Ending all forms of discrimination and violence against women and girls. That sort of takes us into the second goal, which is eliminating all forms of violence against all women and girls in the public and private spheres, including trafficking and sexual and other types of exploitation. Now, these goals apply to women everywhere. I want to talk specifically about how these apply to African women in Africa and also African women in the African diaspora, specifically the United States and specifically St. Louis. Eliminating all harmful practices such as child, early and forced marriages, and female genital mutilation. That is a particular problem that we face in Kenya. We have some communities where FGM and early childhood marriage are part of the culture, and unfortunately, it's still prevalent. In my abstract, I did say there has been quite a lot of progress made in some of these areas, and we see these a lot of education and awareness, promotion of awareness about early child marriages and female genital mutilation, and there have been efforts to reduce that, to eradicate that really, but we are still very far from achieving that. And one of the things also that you will note is that those problems, while they are in the African continent, we also, as we go, I always say, wherever I go, there I am. So we come from Africa and we come here, or wherever we go, and we go with our cultures and our cultural practices. So the issue of FGM, while you might think it's an issue that is not here, it lives among us, because the people that have practiced this, we sort of migrate with our customs and practices. Recognizing the value, this is a particularly important one to pay attention to. Recognizing the value of unpaid care and domestic work through the provision of public services, infrastructure, and social protection policies. The idea of unpaid care and domestic work, this is one that I'm intimately familiar with, just from my own experience growing up in Kenya. You can see, like life in the village, we would have the men at the end or in the afternoon, in fact, a lot of men, and I don't say this to speak ill of my village, but it's upon reflection that I think about this now, that men would go to the shopping center, spend their afternoons there talking, maybe having a beer, while women stayed home and worried about what to feed their children and what was the next thing that they needed to do. The affairs of running the home have been left predominantly to women. And for the most part, men in Kenya especially are very uninvolved in household responsibilities. I want you to keep that in mind, because that presents a particular challenge for the community that moves, for the Africans in the diaspora, and how those same cultural practices, the things that we have done, how those then show up where we go and present challenges. Further, on UN goal number 5, ensuring women's full and effective participation in equal opportunities for leadership at all levels of decision making, political and economic and in public life, universal access to sexual and reproductive health. Maternal child health care continues to be a problem. And we see that in a lot of our African countries. That continues to be the case also in the United States among the diaspora, and we're going to talk about that in a few moments. And finally, undertaking reforms, another very important one, undertaking reforms to give women equal rights to economic resources as well as access to ownership. That sounds really easy to talk about. Access to ownership and control over land and other forms of property. It's only recently that the Kenya legislation was revised to allow women to own property, to allow women to own land. This was something that was unthought of. Title deeds were always in a man's name. If a man died and a woman was left a widow, then she could not, her property was easily taken by her husband's family because she had no claims and no rights to the property that she had owned with her husband, because the land was not in her name. The title deeds, any property was not in her name. Very recently, there have been changes to revise some of those laws and allow women, which I cringe even as I say that, the idea of allowing. Why do we need allowing to own that which you have really worked hard for? So those are changing. Unfortunately, there are ways in which that plays out here, as we will see shortly. So, understanding the context of the diaspora. Diaspora is a term, some of you might not be very familiar with this term, but it's a term that's used to refer to the people who have migrated from their ancestral land and made their home elsewhere. So when you think about the African diaspora, there are over, Africans are everywhere. If you go someplace and there is not an African, you better run, because it means that that's not a hospitable place to be. People leave home for many, many reasons. So there are lots of Africans scattered across the world. In the United States, the last data that I could find indicated that there's more than 1 million. This was from 2010. I couldn't find anything from 2020, which I imagine there would be in the 2020 census. But from the 2010 census, it indicated that there was over 1 million Africans in the United States alone. Of those 1 million Africans, I would say about, at the 2010 census, it was 90,000 were Kenyans. By 2020, the estimate was about 160,000 that were Kenyans, right? So as I speak about the diaspora, for purposes of this presentation, I'm going to narrow my conversation, just my focus to be African women and Kenyan women in particular. So recognizing and acknowledging that there are a lot of people from different African countries in St. Louis and beyond, but just for purposes of this, we'll talk mostly about the Kenyan population. People immigrate for different reasons. When we talk about immigration, there's voluntary immigration, there's involuntary immigration. Involuntary immigration, again, takes different types, dates back to as far back as slavery. That's sort of the one thing that you think about when you think about involuntary migration. People that were forced to leave their ancestral home and go some other place, not out of their own will or out of their own volition. That's pre-modern. In the modern times, we also have involuntary migration. A lot of that comes from people who are refugees, who are fleeing war or some political crises, people seeking asylum because an example is if you're a young girl or woman whose family wants to marry you off, and you're not ready to do that, or you don't have the capacity to make your own decisions, then people would look for ways out of that. So it's not that they're looking to move, but then they're sort of forced by circumstances to go elsewhere. Forced marriages, female genital mutilation as well, the threat of female genital mutilation. And another one that is very prevalent lately is domestic violence and abuse, that women are fleeing because of domestic violence and abuse. When you talk about political unrest as well, civil wars abound. Think about Sierra Leone, Ivory Coast. Kenya, for example, we had tribal clashes after the 2008 elections, and a lot of people had to leave their homes and go find a place elsewhere. So those are involuntary reasons for migrating. There's also sexual trafficking. I won't get into much of that because I don't have a lot of information about it, but I'm aware that that's also another form of involuntary migration. Looking at voluntary reasons for migration, people come to the United States or leave their home countries for various reasons as well. An example, myself, I left Kenya in 2001. I was coming to the United States to study, and I came and I got my degrees, and then I decided I wanted to live here, and I got a green card and ended up getting citizenship. A lot of Africans have come to the United States that way and remained. And as a citizen, I can now bring a family member. I can file for them and bring them here. So you have sort of that, I hate to use the word chain migration because it had been politicized in ways that I would rather not think of, but chain migration in that sense, that I come and then I bring a family member, I sponsor a family member because I'm now a citizen. In fact, they say the percentage of Africans with advanced degrees in the United States is pretty high. I don't know what the number is, but many people come here to study and then end up staying and bring their family members. Other kinds of voluntary migration is coming as diversity visa. The diversity visa lottery was another thing that, if you're not familiar with that, it's a system that the United States, the Department of State, is that what it's called? Department of State, right? That they have this diversity visa lottery, and every year they have so many visa or positions that are open, and people, you basically get into a lottery, you put in an application, and if you get picked, then you are able to get a green card, or actually I think you can get citizenship and they move here. So a large number of people here as well come that way. Other kinds of voluntary migrations, people coming here to do business, just sort of wanting a different kind of future. So there are people who come here as visitors and they decide, to file or find other ways. I would be remiss not to mention that there's also a lot of undocumented immigrants, right? People who come maybe on a visitor's visa and end up staying because sometimes you file for asylum and you don't get approved and you're still fearful of going back, or the economy, people have become sort of, sometimes you're desperate when you cannot find a job and you're wondering what is there to go back to. So different reasons that people stay here. And types of immigration. The Kenyan context, a lot of people in St. Louis sort of came in the same way. So that was sort of Kenyans at large, but also Africans in general. A lot of Kenyans have come. One of the things that's interesting about Kenyans, and I think Africans in general as well, we are divided into many, many tribes. Kenya, for example, has about 54 tribes. Every tribe has their own language and cultural practices. And so we come here and we find, it's an interesting tendency, you find people that speak your language. So one of the things you'll find among Kenyans in the United States is that there are pockets of people by tribe. You would not think that, but for example, a tribe called the Kisii are predominantly in Texas, in Dallas. The Luo are in Houston, Texas, or some place like that. The Kikuyu, which is my tribe, are in Boston. In fact, we have little, like how you have Little Italy, you would have a little Kiambu, which is one of the towns, the major towns in Kenya that the Kikuyu people can be found in. So when we come here, there are patterns to the ways in which people settle, right? And you go looking for people that understand you, that speak your language, that you feel sort of comfortable with, as you're looking for ways to acculturate and sort of settle into this new land. That can be a blessing in itself, in the sense that when you come here, especially as you think about older people moving here, if you get a diversity visa lottery visa and then you come here, they may not have a very good command of English. They're going to be struggling to find work and things of that nature. So having a way to enter into a new society, when you find people that speak your language, then there are fewer barriers or fewer perceived barriers. So it gives people a sense of safety, and that's why you sort of see these pockets that are arranged by tribe. Those are great. However, there are some downsides to that, because part of what that also encourages is that as people feel really comfortable, it becomes that much more difficult. And I don't know that assimilation is a goal, but it becomes much more difficult to assimilate. And because you have your safety, you have your safety pockets. And so getting out and interacting with people that are not like you, people that don't speak your language, can be very challenging because you're looking for a different kind of experience. So that itself can also be limiting in terms of the kind of experience that people have. I talk about challenges that Kenyan women in the diaspora are faced with. I want to sort of say this as a caveat or as a disclaimer. I recognize too that men are challenged in many, many ways. So this is not to diminish or discount the challenges that men encounter when they move here. But again, for purposes of our conversation today, I want to focus on the challenges that women are faced with, right? A big one is dissonance and racial and ethnic identity, sort of just a struggle with who am I? I just mentioned how you come here as a member of a tribe, right? You're coming from a tribe, you speak this language, and then you come here, and then this is for many people the first time you ever think of yourself as a black person. You've never really thought of yourself as a black person. You've always thought of yourself as a member of a tribe. I'm a Kikuyu, I'm a Luo, I'm this, I'm the other. And now here you are, you identify as a color which puts you in a particular category that has a particular impact on the way you navigate your life in the United States, right? So owning that and becoming that, again, people struggle with that because what does that mean for me? Who am I? We haven't really grappled with that before we move here. One of the things we find even with first generation African children, like my children born here, they're struggling with a sense of identity as well, because I keep talking about home. Where is home, right? Home for them, this is home. They were born here. This is the only home they know. Every time, like I just remember this Christmas, for example, I know several families in St. Louis that went back, it was finally when people could travel. A lot of people are not able to travel because of COVID, and people were finally able to travel, and a lot of Kenyans went home for the Christmas celebrations, and their younger generations stayed behind because they're thinking, what am I going to go home to? They don't speak the language. They cannot have a conversation with their grandmother or their uncle or their aunt. When I take my children to Kenya, they don't speak Swahili. I'm ashamed to say that. They don't speak Kikuyu either. And so they cannot communicate easily with my own family that do not speak English, right? And so for them, my homecoming, for them is not a homecoming, right? And so you have this ongoing, the dissonance for them and for us. Who are they? Who are we? And that leads to some intergenerational conflict. This is a big one, intergenerational conflict, like I said, about like my own children, for example. And the way that they have been, this is all they know, this is all they have known, right? But for people like myself coming here, our reference point is always Kenya. One of the things we talk about a lot, I hear, when kids here are complaining about something that they're struggling with, the tendency of most African parents, of many Kenyan parents that I talk to, is to diminish the concerns of their kid and say, oh, you don't have to walk 10 miles to go to school, right? What are you complaining about? In my time, I didn't have shoes. I didn't have this, right? And so we sort of tend to go to that as a way to dismiss the concerns that our children are bringing. And yet, for them, those concerns are real. Whatever their concerns are, right? They're real and valid, but the tendency for us is to diminish those. So what that does is that it closes avenues of communication where they feel unheard, and then for the parents, we're thinking our kids are not following our customs. They're not listening to us. We're also used to kids listening to us in a way that people don't, like kids in America don't seem to listen to their parents. That is not casting aspersions on American culture. It's just there's a difference in how, that sort of we revere authorities in a way that, like, we're very hierarchical in how we raise our children, right? And here there's more of a freedom of expression. And so parents grappling with that. And that leads to a lot of conflict between parents and their children. And sometimes it has led to very dire consequences that I can speak about examples of later. Economic and financial independence. I talked earlier about the whole idea with the UN Development Goal number 5, the idea of women having the freedom to pursue economic independence, right? And what happens when people come here is that women can pursue jobs, right? One of the profession that a lot of women go into is the healthcare industry. Many women become nurses. You can be a certified nurse's aide or a licensed professional nurse. And men struggle with going into nursing or the healthcare industry, because it requires you to attend to others in a way that our men are not socialized to, right? So for a man to go into nursing, it feels like they're taking a step down. This is very unmanly, and they're emasculated. So they are looking for other kinds of jobs. So the places where jobs would open up for them, they may not pay as well as the jobs in the nursing field or in the healthcare industry are paying. So you then have this economic disparity where women who typically in Kenya have depended on men, and men have been the head of the household, whether financially or otherwise, men are always seen as the head of the household, and then you come here and those positions are switched. So renegotiating the family structure, right, the household structure, where a man is feeling, they might feel disrespected by a wife who has an opinion now, and you're saying this now because you're bringing in the money, right? And it makes for very difficult relationships in marriage. So men go into things like the trucking industry has a lot of Kenyan men, because that's something that is masculine and an easier field for them to go into than to go into a nursing field. Many people migrating here also, one of the difficulties is if you're older, how does your previous work, life experience and educational experience translate into employability here, right? You might have been a teacher, but you need to become a certified teacher to teach in the United States, right? So how does a person that's 40, 35, how do you become that? You'd have to go to school again, right? And that presents challenges. So then you settle for the next best thing, which might be a job at different kinds of jobs that are not related to what your previous experience might be like. I know people who have come here with engineering degrees. One person I knew actually had an engineering degree, and he was a janitor at an airport because he couldn't find work anywhere. And his certifications in Kenya did not translate into anything here. He'd have to take boards and take all kinds of exams and preparations. And that was very difficult for a person like that to go through. Then your sense of self-worth is challenged. How do you assert your authority as a man in your home when you are barely bringing in money and your wife is bringing all the money? One of the things we saw during the pandemic, a lot of Kenyan women took on nursing jobs, even people who were not in the nursing field. Many people just sort of migrated into that field. And one of the other things that happened, a lot of domestic violence. Domestic violence is on the rise because of misunderstandings that arise from these sorts of things. We also had some instances where I can think of maybe 4 or 5 instances where a woman was killed by a husband because they had disagreements about money and felt that the woman was disrespecting him, the wife was disrespecting him because she made more money than he did. That sounds like a minor thing, but I can tell you, I deal with this very, very often. I get calls and just requests for help from women who don't know how to navigate these kinds of things, how to talk to my husband about this, and even the simplest conversation can become very, very difficult to have because of those disparities. And then with that also, the work schedules, right? That a woman is gone and a man is home taking care of the kids. Maybe a wife works a night shift and you're home during the day with the children. Again, our men are not socialized to be nurturers in that way, to raise children in that way, right? So just that whole setup challenges males in a way that then creates problems for the women here, and they have to find ways to deal with that. So talking about, I'll sort of jump over here and talk about domestic violence that I just mentioned. As a result of all of this conflict, then we see an increase in domestic violence. We see an increase in substance use, especially amongst our men and youth as well. And when women are the victims of domestic violence, again, we encourage a culture of silence. These are not things you talk about. A woman is supposed to build her home. It's actually in the Bible, right? And so when the home falls apart, when your family falls apart, the blame is placed on a woman. We're very big on that. Just the idea of women building their home and not really apportioning any sense of responsibility to our men. And so when we have domestic violence, many women suffer in silence because they can't say anything. If you say something, you're exposing your husband. If you call the authorities, then you're labeled in the community as a woman that calls the police on her husband, right? So women suffer in silence, and then you have these instances of women who actually are turning up dead. When there were many, many instances when they could have called for help, but they didn't call for help because our community does not encourage that. And we would rather pretend that this isn't happening. Confusion and misappropriation of gender roles, I think I sort of mentioned that results in the financial independence of women, and men sort of learning how to navigate that. As a result of all of the things I'm talking about, you can only imagine the mental health issues that our population faces. The mental health issues, depression, anxiety, right? Those are two really major ones, depression and anxiety. Again, we do not even have the language to describe these concepts. In my language, for example, in Kikuyu, there isn't a word for depression. There isn't a word for anxiety, right? So those are concepts that really don't exist in our languages, and so they almost don't exist in our culture, and yet people are experiencing particular difficulty, mental health issues. There's stigma around seeking professional help. Again, I can think there's a proverb in my language that talks about the need to keep that which belongs in the home at home, right? And so don't go to people and tell them your problem. So when you encounter mental health issues, first of all, the problem is even recognizing what is happening, because these are not concepts that we're familiar with. Recognizing what is happening and then having the courage to then seek help for that, or even have conversations about it. And I talk about how depression and anxiety and some of these other mental health challenges, they present very differently amongst African women, or Kenyan women in particular. That depression, we have the diagnostic criteria that the DSM lays out, that you would then diagnose a person with depression or anxiety. But for a woman, a Kenyan woman showing up for counseling with me, the ways in which I look for depression, the criteria that I would be looking for in terms of depression would be different from what the diagnostic manual states, because there's some cultural issues here. You have to look at what are the changes, what are some ways that this presents that are different, ways in which a person might be withdrawing, for example, from a woman that doesn't go for a prayer meeting, for example. That may be a really big thing, whereas for another person that might not seem like a big thing, but that would be a way that I look to see, I would gauge mental health for some of these people. Isolation is also a major issue. It's a challenge, particularly because if you're familiar with the idea of third culture, talk about third culture for expatriates or people that go to live and work in other countries, right? Or army brats, for example, military brats, they refer to them, where you are not of there and you're not of here, right? And so with isolation, people come here and you neither belong here nor do you belong where you came from. People in Kenya have sort of written you off in a sense. So when you go back, you don't know who's you don't know who's the minister of what, you don't know who's the celebrity that everybody is listening to and talking about. You have lost touch with what's happening there. And here, there's not really a sense of belonging because you're still perceived as an outsider, right? You don't belong here either. So you're in this place where you're sort of straddling both worlds and not really belonging in either one. And isolation results from just that sense of not knowing. One of the groups that I feel really concerned about, that I have actually spoken with groups of the Kenyan women about, is single women. The way that our self-identity is very much built around family. So a single woman, if you're a woman in your 30s, for example, and you're not married, and you're part of a group in a church, for example, you don't belong in the women's group because there's some sort of implication that the women's group is for married women, right? And you don't belong with a youth group either because you're 30 or 40, right? So where do these people go? And there were major concerns. Some people, again, we had some suicides of women in their 30s and 40s just around COVID time. Again, because this was a time when you don't have any place to go to, and isolation, where that was already a factor, then it becomes even more pronounced during COVID, right? When you have people who no one's checking up on you, nobody will know if you didn't show up to work, right? And also because the ties perhaps with family, because of that idea of, again, straddling two cultures, you don't have very close ties to people at home, and you don't have close ties to people here either. So that's a particular segment of the population that I feel always concerned about. And then another group that really suffers from isolation is older adults. Many parents come here to help take care of their grandchildren. A lot of women come here as babysitters. When I talked about when I become a citizen, I can file for citizenship for a family member. Who do a lot of people file citizenship for? Their mothers and their fathers, right? And why? First of all, so they can be here, but also because they need help, because daycare is really costly, right? Then you have a mother here who's 60, 70 years old, who has been removed from her social support in the village, right? She's not doing the kinds of activities. She can't go to her shamba, her little farm. She can't do the things that she's always done. You're now depending on your adult children for everything, right? And you're left during the day, it's you and these little ones. And then people come home in the evening, maybe you've made them dinner and they go about their affairs. But it's just learning a new way of life. You have particular difficulty learning the language because, as we know, that older people have a much harder time learning a new language and a new culture. So acculturation for them is that much more difficult. And yet there's a really large number of these people moving here and living here. And they just are isolated. Their one chance is when they go to church, and then you can get together with a group of women, right? Or to the mosque or someplace like that where you might see other women. But it's very isolating to spend your life like that and to sort of be removed from all of the support that you had known previously. So all of this brings me to talking about some interventions that we have put in place over the last several years, things that I have been involved in. I want to be careful here. I'm talking about things I have done. There are many things that are happening. There are a lot of wonderful organizations in St. Louis that are involved in really great work to help address some of these challenges. So I just want to highlight some things that I've done. I don't do them alone. A lot of times I hop onto another organization that's doing work that gives me a vehicle through which I can do some work that impacts African women. So V4A, Vital for Africa, is an organization here that seeks to promote awareness and connect immigrants with resources here. So a lot of the things that I do is have conversations. When you think about all of these issues, one of the things that's sort of an underlying issue is our hesitancy to talk about these things. A lot of things fester in silence. There's stigma about talking about the concerns you're having. There's a myth, I don't know if it's a myth, of the strong black woman, right? As a strong black woman, you bear, you build, you do all of these things. You never complain. You don't go out looking for help. So we have to talk. So I talk a lot. I am all over the place talking because I believe that we have to talk. We have to expose, we have to unveil, pull back the silence, break the stigma, and just get people talking about these things so we can recognize what is happening, so we can name the problems, name the issues that we encounter, and that way we would have a way to start actually addressing them. But we cannot address that which we have not even identified and named, right? So much of my talking is putting these things out. So this was a conversation, the mental health in the immigrant communities that I have done with Vital for Africa. I just pulled a few of the things that I have done, talking about the mental health issues, encouraging people to seek help. One would easily seek help for, if you have a headache, if you have cancer, right? But depression does not exist where our people are concerned. You don't go to therapy because by going to therapy, what are you doing? you're exposing yourself, you're exposing your family, right? So you're doing the unthinkable. So part of the privilege that I have being a faculty member at Webster University is that I can say things which might not go over too well in our community. I can call things out, I can name things out, I can call our men out for not taking responsibility and their share in raising their children. So that's where I go and do parents forum, right? Talking about who raises the children. We're not in Kenya where you have these extended family that might help with X, Y, Z, right? That children belong to both parents and that our men have just as much as a responsibility to raising their kids as do our women, right? Conversations about healthy living, again, talking about mental health and physical activity as well as a way to promote health and educating people. I sort of find where people already are. And I like to, when we talk about culturally congruent approaches to anything, when you're working with people, you have to learn who they are. You have to work with them in ways that they can understand and receive you. So one of the things that I base a lot of my conversations on is, I'm not very good with the Bible, but some people might know. I think it's in Jeremiah that says, my people perish for lack of knowledge, or something like that. I don't know the exact verse. But so it's sort of using that as a way to, let's not perish, right? Let's find ways to do this and do it well and find the information. That ignorance is not, we cannot afford ignorance. We cannot afford silence. We have to talk. This was a thing, so this is a different from the previous ones I showed were with Vitendo for Africa. Kwitu is it's an interesting thing. It's a Facebook group that consists of about 15 to 17,000 women, give or take. Kenyan women in the USA, right? I love Kwitu. I'm just a member. I don't know who had the brilliant idea to start it, but it's been a wonderful forum that I go there and educate people about different things. This was at the beginning of COVID, and I talked about, all the single ladies, how to quarantine and social distance without losing your mind. There's a bit of stigma with being single, as I said. Women who are single are shunned because other women might perceive you as a threat to their own relationships, to the stability of their marriages. That's hard to explain, and it's ugly, but it is true. So reaching out to single women about just mental health and how to reach out and build community amongst ourselves. So I do a lot of work with Kwitu as well. So one of the other things that's really interesting about Kwitu, people have this thing called HMI, Hide My Identity. You will post an issue that anonymously post a problem that you're dealing with, and then you get insight from all sorts of people. It could be something as simple as what's good at Aldi, or it could be something as severe as a woman fleeing for her life from a spouse that is threatening her safety. So it's a great forum, and so I go there a lot. I do some talks with my sister as well, who's a nurse practitioner, and we talk about health, mental health, physical health, all sorts of things, again, in our effort to encourage conversations, build community, and create a space where people can talk about things that we don't talk about typically. This is Clear Minds, Better Lives. This is an organization, I love this one particularly because it's a group of young Kenyans that have formed this organization in their own effort. These are young Kenyans who see the problems that their parents struggle with, and they've decided we want to take part in ending this. We want to end the stigma, break the silence. And so they held a town hall. Last year they had a town hall. I gave 5 sessions on different things. This one was on stigma. Some others were parenting, and this was particularly good because it brought a lot of people, not just from St. Louis, but a lot of Kenyans from around the United States as well. Then the other thing that I do, which I have no business doing, but I have really loved doing it, is volleyball. So this here, I called Mary Graff, who's the coach of Webster's women volleyball team. I asked her, do you have some balls that you could spare? These are Webster, if you see, these are Webster volleyballs. She had some balls, and she gave this to me. So I go to this church. This is Christ Covenant Church in Hazelwood, Florissant, that I just noticed that was captioning. I'm sorry, that caught me by surprise. So I go there really early in the morning when the women have their prayer meeting. I join them for the prayer meeting, and since they're already there, then we play volleyball, right? I just love this. So these women, some of them have never played anything, right? Some of these are the women who are here caring for their grandchildren. They don't have an opportunity to go out and do anything physical. We are not a gym kind of people. We don't do the gym, right? So this is an amazing opportunity for people to, because then you're going to have to wear pants, which we also don't do very well with until you move here, right? And not just pants, but tight ones. So that's also not a good thing for a woman of this age to be wearing tight pants. So they don't do the gym. And so this has been an amazing opportunity to play volleyball. I love volleyball. So one of the things I did with this particular thing with volleyball that we've been doing, we start out talking about what is the game of volleyball. I had never played volleyball in my life. My daughter started playing volleyball, and I got really interested. And I have learned so much about it. So looking at volleyball as a metaphor for life and using this as a way to teach the women how to gather a team of people around you, right? And how to identify who's on your team, each person plays a particular role, what are their strengths, what do they add in your life. If you find you're not in the right team, it's okay to leave and go find another team, right? Like Kobe, right? Move, go find another team that will suit you and support you. So we have had several sessions where we just took volleyball and looked at different elements of that game. What I love about it also, you don't have to be great to play volleyball. You don't need a lot. You just need a net and the balls that Mary Graff gave us, and anybody of any age can play volleyball. So we have in this group people as young as, there they are, that's a different day. People as young as my own girls coming in because I needed them to come and help me and help teach teacher Ruth, who's the one in glasses who could not serve to save her life. And so I have my girls come and help me just so that we can teach them some basic skills and play a game of volleyball. This has been particularly gratifying to me to do this. And COVID intervened, and my hope is that we can go back to doing that. People are just now starting to come back to gatherings like that. And I'd love to be able to do something to continue the work that we started. Another thing, I was hoping to play some videos for you, but we're not able to do that. Had some technology issues. But this here is another instance where, again, I find a place where women are. This was a retreat that women had gone to. And we had about 100 women at this retreat. Again, varying in age from 25 probably to about 70, maybe older than 70. And my job, I asked to join, I asked to be invited to these things because I really want to get in. I want to find any opportunity that I can to talk. And the thing about play is that people are uninhibited, right? You do stupid games here. We play silly games. One of the things we did dodgeball. Again, a game that people don't remember. They haven't done this for years, right? We did jump rope. We did tug of war. What you see right here is people getting ready to do a relay with spoons. I had bought these light balls from Walmart, a pack of 100. Everybody had a spoon, and they do a relay. They form teams, and you carry the ball on your spoon and make it all the way to the other end and come back, and the next person goes. And what you can see in the videos is just the excitement. And I look at these women. I see many of them. I know them now. They're caregivers for their children, for their family members. And for them to be out there not worried about a thing. To be able to create moments like that is just such an amazing thing. And the most important thing that comes from this also is the sense of community, right? The sense of community. You start to see each other. You learn you're on the same team. You know people that you didn't know before. You come away from that. From this experience, I've probably had about maybe 15, 17 women reach out to me about other things that were going on in their lives as a result of this encounter here. And if we can just get them talking, so something that they're struggling with, and then I point them to another resource, I point them to somebody else, and we help people navigate the issues that they're facing. So those videos, unfortunately, won't play, but it captures. This was beautiful. This is Teacher Ruth comes to everything, and so this is her again. This was a three-legged race. Just bought bandanas at Walmart and tied people like that, and then you divided into teams, and we did a three-legged race again. And people struggle, and finally you come up with a thing that works. That was one of the videos I was going to show you. But just the uninhibited participation on the part of all of the women there is something that I really look forward to being able to do this again this summer. So that brings us all here to asking, I think I skipped, there we go. So I was talking about what can we do? That's the part that I skipped, right? So, this is, okay, oh, perfect, all right. I need to go back to the previous slide. Yeah, what can we do? What can we do? This is an ongoing question. I keep finding ways to get involved. All of us have to take these on. It's not enough to be unsatisfied with what's happening. It's not enough to talk the talk and not walk the walk, right? The speaker this morning talked about how do we engage with others so that we are transformed, so that those experiences are transformational, not just for them, but for us, right? So some of the things that we do here, there's lots of opportunities to get involved. There's lots of ways that you can get involved. I'm thinking about, I think it was May 5th is a day that's coming up. You don't have to wait until May 5th to give. May 5th is Give STL, right? You don't have to wait until May 5th to give to an organization that promotes work, that promotes inclusion, that promotes equity, that promotes justice, and that connects especially immigrants and refugees to resources that they need. I have a student in a class that I'm teaching now. I'm so thrilled about it. This just gives me goosebumps to think about. My students are doing different projects, and one of my students, who is herself a refugee, came here to St. Louis as a refugee, and she is putting together, she has put together this thing she calls CARBS, Citizen and Refugee Buddy System. If anyone here knows a way to fund that, please let me know, because I told her we're going to make this thing happen. A citizen and refugees buddy system, she calls it CARBS, a way to connect refugees, assign them a buddy to help them navigate a new culture, right? I spoke earlier about how we come and stay in our pockets. Part of the reason we do that is obviously because of comfort, but part of that also is because the welcoming, the community that you're going into isn't always very welcoming. People might say nice things and welcoming things, but not actually really go out of their way to do anything about it. I know that because I have come to learn how in St. Louis it's all about what high school you went to, for example, and people have circles around that, right? It's very difficult to penetrate and get into a group of friends. So we talked last year about getting out of your own comfort zone. Actually, and this is the theme of this conference this year. What are you doing? What are you actually doing, right? We are past the point of talking about this. What are we actually doing? If you're not doing something, find something to do. If you are doing something, keep doing it and find other ways to be effective. So reaching out to communities that do the work, reaching out to people that don't look like yourself, to communities that are doing work that promotes engagement. Give of your time, give of your treasure, support the work that's going on. And an amazing thing here that you also can do is, I want to turn this over because before I get to the questions, because I want to go into the next thing, which is a video that we're going to watch a video for 1 minute about what you can do. You each have a card on your table, right? So I want you to pay close attention to this. It's something that you can do to promote awareness, awareness about the discrimination and violence against women and girls everywhere. And I'm going to turn that over. Would you kindly play the video?
It is time to end discrimination and violence against girls and women. So I ask each of you today to raise a red card, sign the pledge to indicate that you are taking a stand against violence and discrimination in all its forms against girls and women.
I took the red card pledge to end discrimination and violence against women and girls.
I took the red card pledge.
My name is Alamin Hamza and I'm from Nigeria. I just took the red card pledge.
We just took the red card pledge.
You can make a difference by raising a red card to end violence and discrimination against girls and women.
Is that amazing work? You have a red card on your table. If you're watching this from online, redcardpledge.com, please go there and take a pledge. And make your pledge mean something. Take a pledge, add your name, and give a red card to violence and discrimination against women. Thank you very much. Question here, really quickly. I don't know if I should read who it's from. Since the fortunes of the women are interwoven with the behavior of the men, is there any programming? Or education to help the men who are dealing with both the challenges of being an immigrant and the realities of being a black man in America? That's an excellent question, and one that I always think about. And yes, there are some initiatives. Pretender for Africa is an amazing organization. It's usually those small organizations that you don't even know about that are doing some really amazing work. But one of the things we find continually is that when you do this kind of work, the people who come to your events are the people who least need the interventions. Right? That the people that we are trying to reach, that's been a challenge, to reach the people that really need the education, the information that we are trying to put out. So we're thinking of new ways, partnering with Pretender for Africa this next year for a mental health facilitator so that people are informed, and ways to have conversations, difficult conversations in our community, equipping more people with skills to start those conversations. So in answer to that question, is there programming or education to help the men? Yes, there is, but it's not nearly enough, but at least it's starting to happen. And my hope is that we can continue to do more to involve and engage the men because they're an important part of the population that we have to target if you're going to mitigate any of these problems that women are faced with. Was there another question? Yes, in the back.
Step to the microphone. We do have online viewers as well.
Is this better?
Yes.
Okay. Hi. So I'm from South Africa, and so a lot of what you were describing resonates with me a lot. I had a few questions, too. The first one was the organization that you mentioned, the V4A. Is that for any immigrants from anywhere in Africa, or is it just for Kenyans, and is it just for women? And is it regardless of how long you've been here?
Absolutely. Pretender for Africa, that's one of the things we've been talking about in the African community here. It's about breaking those barriers. We talked about how people tend to group by country, and even by country, then you group by tribe or place of origin, town, city, whatever. So we're really trying to diminish some of those and sort of deconstruct those barriers and engage Africans. We have many Africans in this city from everywhere. So absolutely, regardless of whether you came yesterday or 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Yes.
And yeah, the second question was just was it Kwita, the KWIT on Facebook, the group for the single ladies? Is there a single ladies group for South Africans out there?
No, but we absolutely can form one.
Please.
So we'll be talking. We need to get one for South African women. Absolutely. Yeah.
And then the third thing is I'll talk to you afterwards, but I have some ideas for how you could connect refugees with families here. But we'll talk afterwards.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Awesome. Any other questions before we close out? Well, thank you very much. You're a very friendly audience. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for that insightful presentation, Dr. Musangali. Do y'all know what's happening tonight? What? Which speaker? The gymnast, yes. It is Laurie Hernandez, and she is the two-time Olympic U.S. Olympic gymnast. And she will be on stage tonight at the Loretto Hilton Center at 7 o'clock. It is not too late for you to register. You can do so at webster.edu/DEI Conference 2022. She has some inspiring stories to share that you will not want to miss. If you're joining us for our next session, we'll start in 30 minutes. So take a stretch, grab a snack, and we'll see you back soon.